When it comes to Democratic politics, the two biggest blocks, black women, black men. The numbers don't lie. Well, the folks at Higher Heights, they have been studying what black women have to say, and they understand the power of their vote, but they also have some serious concerns. So joining us right now to talk about this poll that they put together, the survey they put together, welcome back to the show. Of course, you know, yeah, we had on before. She is, of course, leader of Higher Heights, Glynda Carr. She joins us from D.C. So, Glynda, you're the president, CEO of Higher Heights. All right, the survey you did, what does it say?
So we're just released polling. We talked to 820 black women voters between February 14th and February 22nd. So this is new data. We wanted to kind of get a temperature check of black women going into Super Tuesday and into the State of the Union. And not surprising, black women are multi-issue voters. What resonates in this polling is that black women are concerned about the economy and the pocketbook issues. 58% of black women are concerned about the rising cost of living. 35% of them are concerned about affordable housing, and 27% of black women are concerned about the rising cost of healthcare. So this poll talks about cost, right? Black women want economically thriving, educated, healthy, and safe communities. This poll points to that. When forced to pick three issues that black women are concerned with, obviously the economy rises to the top, but they're also concerned about gun violence, and they're concerned about healthcare.
So we look at rising cost of living, so some of the issues, rising cost of living, abortion, public safety, affordable quality housing, reducing racism and discrimination.
Yes. And so that's an intersectional voter. So as we look at at candidates vying for our votes, they want to hear about the smart solutions and innovative policies that intersect at our ability to thrive in this community.
And when you say candidates, we're not talking about just D.C. We're talking U.S. Senate candidates, congressional candidates, gubernatorial candidates, people running for state senator, state rep, all of them.
Yes. And so oftentimes we get caught in a discussion about Washington, D.C. and about the top of the ticket, but there are candidates that are going to be or should be knocking on our doors, making phone calls, texting, and being in community conversations with black women. This poll also talks a little bit about, as you mentioned, that we understand our power. We still feel like our vote is taken for granted. So let me dissect that anecdotally. We talk about our vote being taken for granted because this democracy is a 365-day-a-year activity. But oftentimes, our elected leaders and those vying for our votes will come knocking on literally and figuratively knocking our doors 14 days before the election cycle. Black women want to be active participants in this democracy. And so that is not only leading into the voting booth, but leading outside of the voting booth. And they want to hear clear solutions and policy solutions around the issues we care about.
See, Glynda, this is what I was talking about when I was talking with Quentin about why I felt if you're trying to really run differently, you should have been starting, frankly, 9 months ago. Because it's a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of stuff that got passed, but you got to break it down. You know, may rest in peace, Joe Madison, but he would always say you got to put it where the goats can get it. And so you can't talk about the Inflation Reduction Act if you don't explain, okay, well, what the hell was in it? Okay, Build Back Better, what was in it? How did this impact very specific communities? I remember when the president gave a speech, I think it was at North Carolina A&T, and I would love for you and Quentin to talk about it. I'm gonna bring my panel in as well. But he gave a speech to North Carolina A&T, and they still do it. $7 billion to HBCUs. I'm like, no. That ain't how you get black folk attention. You got to be able to say, A&T got this. Winston-Salem State, you got this. North Carolina Central, you got this. You got to do a roll call. You got to actually say, Florida A&M. The state gave Florida A&M X millions in 2021. We gave them 4 times as much money. You got to make it plain where somebody goes, wait a minute, hold up. Florida only gave Florida A&M $40 million, and y'all gave them $200 million? That's something somebody can relate to. That, to me, is, I think, how you have to explain to not just black voters, but all voters, what you have done. Glynda, you first, then Quentin.
Yeah, absolutely. I was recently with Senator Raphael Warnock, and he's been shifting how he talks to Black women. So he's recently been in some large rooms with Black women, some Black women, sorority conferences. And what he said is, instead of talking about student loan debt forgiveness, he literally says, "Do you know anyone that has seen their debt relief?" And he said, almost every single person in that room may not have affected me, but right. I know someone that was able to do that. He then said there were women with two hands up. Not only did I benefit from it, but I know someone in my family or in my network. And so we have to put real life stories. That's what this poll points to.
There you go.
The poll points to that Black women realize that they are seeing more Black women in elected and appointed leadership. And so that is the strength. Sending out Vice President Kamala Harris to talk about reproductive freedom and the lived experience as a woman and a Black woman is a winning strategy. Being able to have, candidates and surrogates talk about how this economy affects and what we need to do to move this country forward and not backwards, we have to be good storytellers.
Quentin, if I Biden Harris, I ain't speaking nowhere unless I got 5 people in the audience who got student loan debt relief.
Right, exactly.
I'm shouting them out in every speech.
And look, I think, part of our endorsement this weekend is we're going to see over the next few weeks a real rollout of a messaging kind of program around the accomplishments, to your point. We've been telling them, you have actual frame that you can work with right now. It starts with our health, right? They've lowered prescription drug costs, $35 for insulin. They've helped raise the insurance rate of African Americans to the highest levels that we know. Our health, our wealth, our wallets, our rights, they have a frame to work with, but to your point, you got to break that down for folks. So wherever you're traveling to Georgia or North Carolina, you got to break those things down.
And if you saying the $35, you got to say 68,000 African Americans in Georgia or whatever the number is.
Exactly.
I mean, that makes it personal.
It does. And I think we're going to start to see that as the campaign kind of gets into gear over the next few weeks. But I think the good thing about this, Roland, I will say, they have accomplished a lot for our communities. It's just the fact that they are messaging in it, and they haven't been doing that. But we have a story to tell, and to Glynda's point, we got to do it around stories. We got to do it in our kind of Black vernacular, right? This kind of point that I've been making with them is we got the receipts, right? You have a record to run on. We don't want to kind of, frame this as Joe Biden has delivered for Black people. No, Joe Biden has receipts for our community, right? And how do we actually begin to roll that out in a way to where it connects with people where they are, where they live, where they work, where they go to school?
Glynda, in the poll that y'all did, I'm going to go to the panel next, did Terrence do the same thing with these sisters he did with Black women? Say they said this, but then when reciting the accomplishments, did their perspective change?
This poll was to do a baseline touch point on what they're interested in. We are at Higher Heights. We'll be spending the year. As you know, African Americans sometimes are not represented in polling, particularly polling that is not commissioned and designed for and by Black people. And so Higher Heights' commitment in this cycle to make sure we not only are we from a polling perspective, but focus group perspective, talking to Black women voters consistently in this election cycle, because we need to be limber, right? Just like the world changes in the way that Black women are being targeted by mis and disinformation, we actually need to be armed with how that is impacting them. As relates to the discussion around how are we spending our money, as you know, Black women, based on our poll, are getting their news from local news, ABC, CBS, NBC News, and social media, right? That is where you come into play, right? Roland, is like, how are we investing in and making sure that we are engaging Black women across age, right, intergenerational, that we are not only combating the misinformation that is coming towards us, that we are in fact being the go-to places with factual information for and by Black people.
Well, the Black Pact poll showed that African Americans were getting lots of negative messaging on Biden-Harris from social media, which is why I keep saying you got to have hand-to-hand combat. When folks are posting that, you got to literally be in comments. Wrong. That's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. And dropping the factual information. Makongo, you're first up. Question for Glynda. Quentin, go ahead.
Yes, my question is for you, Ms. Carr. In your polling that you did, with all of these Black women, was the question ever brought up, or was there any responses related to this argument about the overall threat to democracy? All of these news stations are always talking about Biden needs to run on that. He needs to run on, Trump's an existential threat to democracy. Is this something that's resonating with the Black women that you polled?
Yeah, the poll does point to that people are concerned about our democracy, right? The protecting of their vote, free and fair elections is a touch point. When you look at the data, it is literally the top 6 issues are split almost evenly. I think Black women know that this democracy in our country is literally on fire, right? And that we can't just put all our eggs into one basket. They are concerned about education and CRT. They're concerned about, fair elections and their vote continuing to count. And so it is about, as Quentin mentioned, that we are going to hone in on the messaging that will resonate among African Americans, but we also aren't a monolith. Right. And so we oftentimes are being messaged in a way that is very broad. We want our, this release of a public poll is to be able to use by our, colleagues and, groups that may not be able to host their own polls to go, how do we hone in on message? Our counterparts spend a lot of time talking about what is the message for swing voters, right? There's a lot of nuances on how to talk to swing voters. This election cycle is going to be about them understanding how sophisticated Black voters are, and that we're demanding them to raise their bar on how they're going to talk to us, and frankly, how we talk to each other. Our most effective messenger, right? When you fire up a Black woman and give her the tools and the information, she doesn't go to the polls alone. She brings her house, her block, her church, her sorority, and her union. And polls like this and the work that our partners do at Collect Pack is that we're going to be very targeted about how we talk to and engage and motivate Black voters this cycle.
And Quentin, the point Glynda just made, how you talk to us. The threat to democracy doesn't resonate with us. They're closing our polling locations. That's being very specific, which is a threat to democracy, but you got to talk that way.
Yeah, exactly. Like Black people know that democracy really hasn't ever worked for us in this country.
Right.
And so it's always,
we get that.
It's always been broken. And so framing it that way is, to your point, is not detailed enough, right? But talk about January 6th, right? An insurrection. We understand what trying to overthrow the government looks like.
And they were mad about four cities.
Exactly.
Atlanta, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit.
Exactly.
That was the cornerstone of January 6th. Trump kept saying those 4 places. What are those 4 places?
Black cities.
Black cities.
Exactly. And you think about the other side, right? 91 criminal charges. We know what, not serving your time looks like. We know what you trying to run from charges looks like. So you got to break things down in a very different way. And I think if we figure out a way to do that, Roland, I think we'll be very successful, but we got to do it. We can't talk about these overarching things. No. We got to dig in to the real issues.
Look, we do it every day. But again, it's having messages who know how to talk to our people. Teresa, your question for Glynda, Quentin.
Yes. In your polling, did you ever ask the question of who are these women going to vote for overall?
We have not deep dived in that. What we found in this poll is that overwhelmingly Black women are interested in engaging in this election cycle. They are concerned about their vote being taken for granted. That means there's work to be done. If you talk about it from a political lens, we now, in theory, have a presumptive, we know who our nominees on both sides are going to be. So we now have time to talk about motivating Black women. Of course, based on age, younger voters are less likely to be ready to vote in the cycle. So there's work to be done.
And Glynda, your poll, how do you identify younger? Is it 1835, 1839, 1845?
And I'll put that up for you right now.
All right.
It's based on, as you know, Terrence Woodbury did this work. And so there is this notion of your boomers and your Gen Xers. You have your millennial, I'm going to talk about, Quentin, your older millennials versus kind of this in between of a Gen Z and a Gen Z and a cusp millennial.
Right.
And so it varies drastically. What we now have is, right, in two primary, we have two new very strong voting blocks, and that's what I'm calling them. You have uncommitted, which is a voting block that is being organized and funded, and then you have those who are saying they're staying at home, right?
Yes. I call that the couch voters.
Mm-hmm. And that's a vote. That is a very growing, strong voting bloc, right? And there is a discussion and motivation, and that crosses age demographics,
yes.
right? There are people across age demographics that believe that they can't vote in the cycle, they can't vote for a Biden, and so they're sitting at home. Now, that's a conscious decision, but we need to spend some time talking about that. That is a conscious decision.
Yes.
That is not just you. That is a growing voting bloc.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, when you are sitting there, Roland, what did you call it? A couch voter?
Yeah.
That you are actually impacting this election cycle.
Yes.
And so you will have to live with that consequence on the other side.
Because what I say, Glynda,
Black women sat out.
Because what I say is, when our vote decreases, what then happens is you actually are making their votes actually go up. And so the reason black turnout was so great in '08, it actually canceled out. Black turnout goes here, and white voters were pretty much right here. So it canceled out a lot of those particular votes. Obama won North Carolina by 14,100 votes. Biden loses North Carolina by 2.5 points. Look at the numbers. Black voters went down, and then all of a sudden, the margin of victory goes up. That's what you're speaking to.
Yep. And at the end of the day, these national people don't think their vote matters. 2020, 2016 has proven, in particularly a presidential cycle, that every single vote matters, and the margins are so low, like narrow, that you just sitting some out. So there is I'm sitting out, self-identify sitting out. At the end of the day, there is a concentrated effort, right? Justice Quinton and, our colleagues at Voto Latino, people who are investing in bringing out Black and Latino and Asian voters. There is a counter narrative of people spending millions of dollars to depress that vote.
Yep, and that's a part of the whole deal, this whole democracy piece here, Quentin. And then this thing ain't anecdotal.
No.
It's real. It's sitting right there, so you got to confront it.
Exactly. And I think what we started to see, I think, last Thursday at State of the Union is him being a little bit more aggressive, right, coming directly from the candidate. To your point, though, that has to trickle down to your comms team, to your digital team. Everybody has to be on the same page around punching back and being really direct around what's going to happen. He's calling out things that are happening wrong with immigration or democracy or who Trump's hanging out with, right? He's hanging out with other dictators. That's going to be really critical that we kind of point those things out, but we bring it home to where folks can connect.
And then you're talking about Josh Stein running against Mark Thompson in North Carolina.
Right, exactly.
Listen, you got to pay attention to Sherrod Brown trying to get reelected in Ohio, because if he loses in Ohio, Tessa loses in Montana, guess what? Republicans now control the Senate. Now you're not getting more of those black judges. Exactly. Now you're not getting the agenda through if the Republicans control the House. Mm-hmm. And so this is also where connecting the dots matter. Julian, your question for Glynda.
Glynda, I'm looking at your poll. It looks great. Thanks for your hard work. I have a question about the priorities and how we're drilling down on them. You said 58% care about housing. You're looking at gun violence. You're looking at economic issues. What kind of education is Higher Heights or other organizations doing to make sure people understand why and how they're voting? Just using those buzzwords, I don't think works for a lot of voters who are not fully engaged. What's the education piece?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think it is the notion of storytelling, right? This poll was very targeted towards media and stakeholders and those political junkies like me who like to, have the data behind this. It didn't surprise me that Black women are multi-issue voters, that Black women are concerned. Like, I am a Black woman. I know what I'm concerned with. I know what makes me not sleep at night or wake up in the middle of the night. Our work at Higher Heights over the next, couple of months as we drive in is actually being your go-to place for and by Black women to provide for Black women to be informed, engaged, and to take action. And do it in a way that every day my cousin, to my best friend in Atlanta will be able to have the information they need to not only protect their vote, but more importantly, have those important conversations at dinner tables with the men in their lives, with the young women in their lives, in a way that says, this is how the country has been moving forward. Here is what may happen. We are fighting for literally what our grandparents fought for. And so we are at a crossroads in this, in this democracy, and being able to talk about it in a way that resonates is the work ahead. And that's what Higher Heights will be doing over the next 6 months, is ensuring that we are giving real life information, connecting with real Black women telling their stories, and more importantly, connecting them to Black women running for office and Black women who are in elected office, to be able to talk about when my friends sit at brunch and say, well, one, my vote doesn't matter, or it doesn't affect my day-to-day life. The notion, as you know, Juliana, right, is that every single thing we do, from the light bulb out in front of our house to if we have a pothole in front of our house, is tied to a public policy that is tied to an elected official that you chose to vote for and not vote for.
And I know this ain't gonna happen, but it's interesting how mainstream media talked all this stuff about all these polls and Black people. Yet when Black Pac dropped their poll last week, none of them called. They only talked to us. So let's see who calls you at Higher Heights, Glynda, because again, they keep talking about Black people and all these other polls where we represent a small sample. Here, y'all talk to just Black women. Collective Black Pac talk to just Black people, Black men and Black women, and they don't want to talk about those polls. So I always find that to be real interesting, but that's also why we got to have Black-owned media. Glynda, we appreciate it. Keep us abreast of what's next.
Will do.